Good afternoon, folks. Hope all of you are doing well. Thanks for joining us today. Special shout out to our clients in Europe. I know it's quite late there, and in Asia for tuning in. Today, we will be featuring an outstanding crypto services provider focused solely on Bitcoin. Yes, that is true, solely on Bitcoin. Swan Bitcoin is a Bitcoin-only digital asset platform that recognizes Bitcoin as the premier reserve asset and wants to be the preeminent service provider around this asset. Services include trading, block trading, dollar cost averaging, wealth management services, and education, and a whole slew of other services, which you will learn about shortly. By leveraging a Bitcoin-only focus, Swan is well-positioned to service a critically underserved cohort of potential and existing Bitcoin investors. You can find some of their educational journals on our website. I urge you to check them out. It's some of the finest writings on cryptocurrency and in particular Bitcoin. Today, we're joined by founder and CEO and the friend of the firm, Cory Klippsten. Cory has an extensive experience in angel investing, having been an advisor to over 50 plus startups. He has spent his early part of career at Google and Microsoft. He is a partner in the Bitcoin Venture Fund and a founder of Bitcoiner Ventures. Cory also has an MBA from my alma mater, University of Chicago. In short, Cory brings deep knowledge and experience to lead Swan. Also today, my partner Tom will join the webinar to give his thoughts on both the digital asset space and Swan Bitcoin. This webinar will be moderated by our crypto consulting head, Sean Farrell. There will be a Q&A at the end of presentation. You can ask questions using Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will send out replay information shortly after the webinar. Feel free to share with colleagues, friends who could not make it today. I need to make one disclosure for compliance purposes. My partner, Tom, is an early investor in Swan Bitcoin. And with that, as always, my colleagues and I are grateful for your support and business. Feel free to contact us with any suggestions and thoughts. And I will now turn the mic over to my partner, Tom. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I think that was a great introduction by John of Cory and Swan Bitcoin. But as John said in the disclosure, I am an early investor. And I wanted to give you sort of some reasons I think that what Cory and Swan are doing are quite differentiated. And foremost, in my days of being an equity analyst, I think three things have always been important to find companies that create value for their shareholders. The first, and it's very obvious, is you want to buy a company that's in an industry with a addressable market that's growing. And let's face it, if we say what can be the sort of top two, top one even opportunities in the next decade, I think digital assets has to be among them because it is really the intersection of financial and technology. So you're taking two of the biggest industries in the US and the world and seeing the ability to disrupt it because of decentralized blockchains and a lot of the unique features that come with crypto, especially Bitcoin. And if you think that Bitcoin is still something that's a hobby, just think about what's happened in 2022. It should really put a lot of those questions to bed. Number one, the White House has already now put together a task force to actually figure out a way for the US financial system to coexist with digital assets. That is not what anyone would have expected 5 years ago to happen in 2022. The second is take a look at conflict regions. People said Bitcoin's not money. It's not a store of value, but anyone who's been in Turkey, Venezuela, now Ukraine or Russia, they all know that when there's a rapid devaluation of their own assets and then their need to actually be able to access capital, they've all turned to Bitcoin. That's really just transformational. especially we're seeing it real time in war torn and conflicts. But number three, I think increasingly we're going to find that debt investors, which is 55 trillion of holdings in the US, are going to realize that Bitcoin might even be a better way to generate yield and return and store value. And so for those who think the only people who are going to buy crypto are speculative investors or retail investors, that's not the case. I mean, I'd say that the best example now is Bill Gross, who is the bond king, is now buying Bitcoin. So hands down, the biggest future addressable market in the next 10 years could be, or should among the top three be, digital assets. But the second sort of thing to differentiate a company is you really want to find a company that is really focused and in a position to capture value through differentiation. And I think that this is what the webinar is going to highlight, that Swan's been very early on a lot of important elements of the crypto ecosystem. You know, number one, they're really one of the premier ways to do OTC trading and private client services. They've got a roadmap that really highlights where this company is going, and you'll hear Cory and Sean talk about that. But at the same time, they're in a smart place to actually capture value, because it's really this on-ramp that they're providing, and over time includes a pretty vast array of services that will make this a holistic service. So I think proven ways to capture value in crypto is, one is mining. It's highly competitive. It's really on-ramps like exchanges and OTC services, which is Swan's doing. And eventually we're going to see an expansion of what payment rails can do. But that's really where some of these sort of companies funded by equity can really capture value. And thirdly, and it's really not third in order, but I think it's important to really bet on a good management team and a board. And I think what you're going to find out here is that Cory and his co-founder, they're very high quality guys. They've got a really deep board. They're doing so many smart things, including publishing books, launching podcasts, launching letters, getting a lot of really smart folks involved. And again, while it is a Bitcoin only focus, as you know, Bitcoin really does anchor the ecosystem. So while we're sort of constructive on the digital asset space broadly, I would say, again, you need to have exposure to Bitcoin, and owning equities or the digital assets themselves offer contrasting opportunities. For instance, if you own Bitcoin, you're gonna get the benefit of its appreciation. But if you get involved with an equity, then you get exposure to not only appreciation of Bitcoin, but then the leverage that one of these companies can have. And I think some of the numbers that you'll see in the slides, for instance, is revenue growth for Swan Bitcoin last year was about 3,300%, which is far greater than the appreciation of Bitcoin itself. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Sean.
Great intro. And I think, Tom hit all of the major points, so I won't take up too much airtime. As Tom had alluded to, here at FundStrat, we are pretty broadly constructive on a diverse range of crypto assets. But taking a step back, crypto networks in the broadest sense are ultimately coordination mechanisms. It's a way to take centralized networks and distribute ownership and utility to the actual participants. And over the past few years, we've seen a Cambrian explosion of these networks that use distributed ledger technology to varying degrees to organize their respective network participants, govern value creation and transfer. But what the ultimate coordination mechanism is sound money, is the monetary policy that is, as Tom alluded to, the base layer that kind of supports economic activity transacted on top of it. And that's how we see Bitcoin evolving over time. Obviously, if you read our research, you'll know that Bitcoin still trades like a risk asset in developed markets. But we don't think that's going to be the case over time. It's already fundamentally, Bitcoin as an asset is fundamentally superior to both, fiat and gold. And the only thing holding Bitcoin back right now is just its early stage of adoption. So, we think as Bitcoin transitions, matures, and goes from this risk on asset to risk off, a couple things will happen. One, those who are early will be rewarded with superior wealth. And two, there will need to be services built around Bitcoin such that it can serve as this superior monetary base. And today we're highlighting a what I would consider a mission-driven company, helping people to front run, Bitcoin adoption, harness those outsized returns over time, and also become that full service Bitcoin company to serve an entirely what we prognosticate to be a much more efficient and sound economy when things are running on the Bitcoin standard. And so that, I will turn it over to Cory Klippsten, founder and CEO of Swan Bitcoin, who will take us through a brief overview of what his company is building and highlight many of the key initiatives they're working on as they look to raise their Series B. As a reminder, any questions you have for Tom or Cory, drop them in the chat.
Well, thanks so much for the very kind introduction, Sean, and thanks so much to the FunStrat team, John, Tom, Carrie, and everyone for granting us this opportunity to share our perspectives on Bitcoin and also share what we are up to with Swan Bitcoin. So I have decided to actually present some of the slides from the report that FunStrat published about Bitcoin and about Swan last week. I believe that FunStrat sent those around this morning. So you should be able to follow along. I've actually selected a subset of 15 of those 38 slides and also mixed up the order a little bit. So try to follow along with me on screen as I share here in a moment, but you should be able to also see the page numbers at the bottom that will correspond to what you actually have in the full deck that FunStrat sent around. So I'll try to keep this relatively short, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and just kind of tell the story of Swan. And I really want to leave plenty of time for some question and answer, because that's sometimes how we gauge what you are most interested in. So again, Cory Klippsten, founder and CEO of Swan Bitcoin. Swan.com is the website. And I'm Cory Klippsten on Twitter if you want to follow me there. It's easy to find me. Here we go. I am sharing and there we are. Okay, great. So, I really wanted to highlight this, and I absolutely loved this slide that FunStrat put together, and I used an early version of this in our very first fundraising deck back in Q3 of 2019. So it's nice to see the update. I'm sure I'll put this on a white background and steal it again. I will credit it, I promise, Mr. FunStrat people. But yeah, it just shows what a small market and what a small market cap Bitcoin still is today. As much as we've all been talking about it for the last decade, it's sub 1 trillion today. Gold is 11 trillion. One way to think about this sort of top-down sizing is, Bitcoin, many of us believe, is the best tool for the job of store of value. And so its potential is that entire pie, that 418 trillion of global wealth. And as you can see in the call out box, if it only captures 5% of the pie for which it is the best tool for the job, that would be $1 million a coin, $21 trillion market cap. My personal, how I think about my family's finances, strategy for the company, strategy for my investments in the space, I personally have a forecast of more like $100 to $200 trillion market cap in the sort of 2035 to 2040 range. So this is really my grand thesis for the rest of my career, along with sharing Tom's bullishness on U.S. equities through 2038 with millennial peak consumption. I'm a big believer in that one as well. But I think Bitcoin is the biggest story that's out there right now. So moving on to Swan specifically, let's start with kind of the headline first. What I really I and the team, what we want to be is the first consumer-focused Bitcoin-only U.S. listed public equity in by 2024. So in the next 2.5 years, our goal is to be public on the NASDAQ, hopefully. And I think what we need to do between now and then is about 5x to 10x our revenue, and we should be in a sweet spot there to make that happen. Obviously, there are public mining companies like Riot, which I'm an advisor to, and Mara, and I know Fred here from Southern California, but there is not yet a consumer-focused Bitcoin company, leaving Square aside, or Block, obviously, because they have a lot of other things going on, but I'm a big admirer of theirs as well. And I think this headline captures exactly what we are moving into with Swan now. So for the first couple of years, we launched March 30th, almost 2 years ago in 2020. And I think our goal for the first couple of years of the company was to be the most recommended place to buy Bitcoin by Bitcoiners. We were surfing on that recommendation network. We really wanted Bitcoiners in the core community to be big Swan fans and to tell their friends and family and colleagues to come to Swan. And now we're getting a little bit more out there. We're going to the next concentric circle outside the core. And we really want to embody trust. We are trying to be the most trusted name, the most trusted team, the most trusted company in Bitcoin. And that's kind of the North Star for the company right now. We'll get into some of the services a little bit later when we go through the historical and the future roadmap. Tom alluded to this. Our revenue growth year over year was pretty spectacular. You can see that we sold a little over $600 million worth of Bitcoin in 2021, and our fee revenue was almost $7 million for the year. And this was increasing toward the end of the year, so the run rate was a bit higher on those. We're hoping for continued growth like this this year, and be hard. Obviously, it's a lot of small numbers and large numbers, but we are seeing growth this year, and we think that the goal of, again, a 5 to 10x on these numbers over the next couple of years, just doing more of the formula that we've already dialed in is very reasonable and should result in the kind of outcome that I just described. We've also become dramatically more profitable. We've improved our margins dramatically through better vendor negotiations and pricing from all of the different inputs that come into our system, just cutting costs in different places. And you can see that sort of in the chart on the right. This is a non-GAAP number, but adjusted net revenue is something that we track, and that has just about tripled over the last year. So really exciting what we've done on the profitability side as well. So one of the keys to sustainability, and whether you are sort of a subscriber to Andreessen Horowitz or NFX Guild out in San Francisco, or anyone else that talks about network effects, one of the network effects that can sustain margin for the long term is a really, really strong brand. And this has always been, from the very beginning, a brand building exercise. And I think it's important to note how we did that. And essentially what we did is we kind of cornered the market on all of the best known Bitcoin educators. So the people with the biggest podcasts, all the people that authored the books, these people I reached out to, became friends and became trusted by them, and essentially put on the cap table early on onto an advisory board back in 2019. And then about half of them ended up coming and working for Swan. So Stefan Livera, who is the host of probably the number 2, I would say, Bitcoin focused podcast, is our head of international sales. Andrew Edstrom, who wrote Why Buy Bitcoin, which is the best book on Bitcoin for financial advisors. He runs Swan Advisor Services. Jan Pritzker wrote what I consider to be the absolute best introductory book to Bitcoin. It's just called Inventing Bitcoin. And he's my co-founder and CTO. So again and again, we found these people, we became good friends with them. They wanted to join this team that was focused on education, and education, content marketing, that is our marketing. It is essentially organic. We have grown our reach dramatically. You can see those numbers sort of at the bottom, and this goes across all kinds of platforms, but over 4 million Twitter followers for our team. 350,000 people opening emails from us every month is more than Bitcoin Magazine plus Pomp combined. So we have a lot of ways to get out in front of people. And I think that's something that is going to continue even as we layer a lot of paid marketing onto our machine post Series B. I think the organic marketing is something that we can really, it provides sort of a floor on what we can be, because it continues to add people just without having to pump money into it. We just keep doing what we do with our organic reach, which is great. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. And so it's a nice flywheel. And I usually close with this, but I wanted to bring it up, this point of our thesis that essentially the more you know, the more you buy. And that going really, really deep on Bitcoin, conditional upon somebody going very deep on Bitcoin, they're usually going much, much deeper into share of wallets. So they're digging deeper. It's a common story that someone who is sort of nibbling around in crypto, meaning Bitcoin plus all of the other cryptocurrencies, might be punting, 2 or 3% of their portfolio. It's kind of risk on. They're taking some bets. They're doing some trading. People who get a lot of conviction about Bitcoin often go much, much deeper. They're talking 10%, 20%, maybe even 50% of their portfolio. And so with Swan being the company that's known for that, our average revenue per user is dramatically higher than what you see on the crypto exchanges. You can see that about a 4x over what Coinbase's numbers are down on the bottom left. So I think that's really exciting. And we hope to see that type of spread and deep into the wallet continue as we grow. As mentioned, the team is really, really spectacular. We have a new chief revenue officer coming over from Bridgewater. One of our new Swan private client sales reps is leaving after 12 years selling institutional desk at Goldman Sachs. One of our other guys is a former MD at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch on that team. Again and again. And the engineering team is absolutely spectacular. People with lots of exits, people that are really, I think Tom mentioned, or maybe actually, I think Sean mentioned mission driven. That's really what it comes down to. We only hire Bitcoiners, and love us or hate us, we are very passionate. And there are a lot of people that will only work on Bitcoin companies. And so having one of those companies means that you get spectacular people in every role. We have hired incredibly well. We get people well under market salaries. Everybody wants to work for equity. Everyone sees Swan essentially as a vessel to work on building a bright orange future with Bitcoin. And so kind of doing well by doing good. And you essentially get these people that are working 60, 70 hours a week, very responsible, very responsive, very collegial, very easy to run a remote company with 55 people all over the world. And everybody does exactly what they say they're going to do. We have yet to have a full-time employee leave the company, and we have yet to fire a full-time employee. So the fit has been absolutely spectacular. I've never seen anything like this. I've been involved in over 50 companies. Jan's been involved in 3 exits and 7 startups and invested in a bunch. He's never seen anything like this. It really is a special group of people that is working hard. And as far as headcount roadmap, I think that we can do that 10x revenue that we're shooting for over the next couple of years, about doubling the staff. So I think we'll be probably a little over 100 people by the time we can 10x revenue. That's kind of the roadmap plan there. Historical product development, we've moved really fast. I think these callouts are right. We started out with just recurring purchase plans. That was the easiest thing to get started. That was how we could spread really fast through the Bitcoin community, because that was something that was a theme of stacking in the bear market, and coming back into the early bull was the promotion of Bitcoin as a savings technology and a long-term store of value. So that got really popular with the Bitcoin plebs, as they say. And then we added instant purchases, so just one-time buys, and also large OTC orders with funding by wire, and now large ACH as well. That led to the obvious step for us of essentially launching. I loved the private client services brand when I worked at Morgan Stanley in their marketing department long ago. Jeez. It's over 20 years ago now. And so I always loved PCS as a brand for that type of white glove service. And we started hiring some of the smartest people in the world that had that type of experience and deep expertise in Bitcoin. And so that team is, I think, 7 or 8 people now, handling essentially high net worth individuals and small and medium-sized business buyers, entity accounts, trust accounts, IRAs, 401ks, pretty much everything complicated and everything large for people from over 100 countries around the world. So that business is actually more non-US than US. I think it's about 60-40 international versus domestic, which is pretty cool. Our retail business is almost exclusively United States today, but we hope to expand that over time as well. We launched a great gifting product that a lot of people used. Probably some of you used it as well. Just before the holidays, we'll be making some improvements again with a sprint later this year to get that out. The Bitcoin benefit plan is really cool. We just are doing the PR for that right now, and it lets bosses actually buy Bitcoin as a fringe benefit for all of their employees. So we have about 24 companies launching that with a bunch of PR next month. So that should be really fun. We've also been doing a lot of integrations. So we are really good at building APIs, and we've been able to make fantastic purchasing experiences and plan signups happen in other people's websites and other people's apps. So Trezor, which is one of the top 2 wallets in the world, we're the exclusive US on-ramp that will launch later this month. Spectre, which is one of the top 2 multi-sig setups, multi-signature custody setups, and you can actually buy Bitcoin right there inside of their application. Fountain is a big podcasting app. We're built into there for people who want to tip to podcasters, and we have a bunch more of those coming as well. So that's really exciting. I should also just mention, again, the educational roadmap I didn't include here, but you can check that out. What we've done historically. I think summing that up, maybe one way to think about who's involved with Swan and kind of what the credibility and the trust pointers and kind of the authority pointers toward the Swan brand are is if you've ever seen Hive.one, you can look up a search term and it tells you sort of who the most influential people are in a community around a search term. So if you go to Hive.one/Bitcoin, I think it's either 14 or 15 of the top 100 people on there work for Swan, which is about 5x more than any other company in the world. So definitely kind of hang our hat on having a lot of the authority figures in Bitcoin kind of pointing towards Swan. So, as many people have said before, the monetization of an asset passes from store of value into medium of exchange and eventually unit of account, when we will actually price things in Satoshis around the world. And that's essentially what the bets that we are placing as well, is being early and being prepared for the explosion of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. How I usually try to explain this in my own mental model is the cohort of people who are going to demand spending services or medium of exchange functionality are the people that have been around for a couple of cycles. So if you've been in Bitcoin for 8 to 10 years and you've had conviction for 8 to 10 years, you're going to be at that point where Bitcoin is a significant portion of your net worth, and you're going to be much more interested in finding ways to spend Bitcoin. And that's what's going to drive merchant adoption. Services, the Stripes and the Squares and the Visas and the MasterCards of the world are going to respond to the increasing numbers of those cohorts that come to have a lot of their net worth in Bitcoin. So where I see it is, I think we had a big bubble that the snake swallowed in 2017 with all those people that came in, and those people that got conviction. It's a very large cohort that will essentially, if they keep riding it all the way through to 2025, 2026, there will be an explosion of medium of exchange services over the next few years, sort of getting ready for that, and then an absolute tsunami once those people actually kind of hit that mark. So we're seeing it. We're seeing the growth in the Lightning Network, dramatically exponential over the last year. We want to be there. We want to have real estate on the Lightning Network. We want to build. We have a Lightning team now working hard. We are launching the Swan app. We've actually never had an app. It's been a mobile web and a desktop web experience historically. So the Swan app is launching. We've already been piloting asset-backed loans and also BTC interest accounts. We actually already piloted those a little bit in Q1. We will probably formally announce both of those in Q2. So I'd probably pull that BTC interest forward. We did buy the swan.com URL, so we're grabbing that and moving over there. Swan IRAs are launching. We're already doing those with a little bit of manual. It'll be completely automated and basically the fastest way to get Bitcoin into an IRA here in the next few months. Swan Advisor Services was announced in October. That team is up and running. The platform is basically built. We'll be launching that, I think, the third week of April. So this is basically using the RIA channel to sell lots of Bitcoin to high net worth folks around the US. We've got IRAs signed up for that have over $200 billion in assets under management. So we're really hopeful that we can spread the word through their books and help them serve their customers better. Lots and lots of bespoke education going out through those channels, supplying them with newsletters, supplying them with individual pieces of content that they can distribute. It really is an education-led marketing push there through the RIA channel as well. We're building a Lightning wallet into the Swan app. And we hope to have that live by Q3. So that team is up and running. Very cool. And then we are in relatively progressed talks with the three top vendors for credit and debit card programs and looking at how that can fit in with us. So Synapse and Solid in the US, hoping that they expand to Europe, and talking to Weaver a lot from Europe, and they're planning to expand into the US with their recent fundraising. So I think as soon as one of those three can kind of credibly serve most of the Western world will be the time that we want to get into that. On the education front, a lot of you may have seen the rise of Natalie Bernell since last summer. She's an Emmy-winning reporter and anchor from Network News who has gone headlong into Bitcoin over the last 9 months. She's become a good friend of the company. She's been on contract with us since last fall, doing all kinds of different things. And we actually have built a set in Malibu right on PCH, a hard set with network TV crew and the whole deal. And we're launching a weekly news show with Natalie as the host, co-produced by us and Bitcoin Magazine. And I think that will be really exciting. She gets very, very big names. So we'll have not just Bitcoin famous, but famous people on that show in the interview segments. And I think we'll cover the news really, really well. If any of you are into social audio, I actually am the founder of Cafe Bitcoin on Clubhouse and on Twitter Spaces. So pop in and see us sometime. That has been, I got to say that social audio has probably been responsible for maybe 40 or 50% of our growth over the last year, just as a new social network where we were sort of very, very early, and the fit of the topic was perfect for the medium. And we saw it and we grabbed the real estate, and we really, really owned Bitcoin on both of those platforms in a big way. So that's been very exciting as well. And we'll continue that. Lots more syndication, distribution partnerships, FundStrat, Hedgeye, Bitcoin Magazine, CoinDesk, and we finally got a PR firm, Feb 1, which is why I've started doing TV appearances on Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, and there'll be lots more of those as well. I'm going to skip this because I think we've talked through most of it. But again, I think it's just a nice highlight, and I wanted to include it to just give a shout out to FundStrat, because I was having trouble with laying out this slide in my own deck, and they did it better. So good job, guys. You're better at slides than I am by a long shot. But just how education kind of feeds everything else that we do, I think that's the fertile ground on which the Swan tree grows. Our fee structure is 99 bips across the board, so just under 1%. And as you can see, the other sort of popular retail options are dramatically higher. So those people that are fee sensitive, we usually get the nod there as well, which is great. And it's plenty of margin, again, because this is, we're not trying to support massive compliance departments, massive legal teams, because we only deal with Bitcoin. It can be extremely lean compared to these massive support teams and legal teams that you need at some of these crypto exchanges. We talked a bit about Swan Private. I highly suggest just going to slide 27 and digging in here, or just go to swanprivate.com. Anybody can sign up for an intro call with one of our experts and get an intro to that. I'm a massive fan of this. It's a huge gap in the market. We're the only professional sales team focused on just Bitcoin. This is something that you just can't do at a crypto exchange, because it's impossible to find somebody that's an expert on 50 assets or 100 assets or something like that. But having people that can go really, really deep on the granddaddy, the big one, the one coin to rule them all, is something that is doable. And I just kind of blew my mind that nobody had done it before. So I'm really proud that we have built that team, and it really is world-class. Swan Advisor Service is similarly, this is kind of a product and service layer within Swan Private specifically for clients who have an advisor or advisors who have clients that are interested in Bitcoin. We really try to be an extension of the team for the FA or for the RIA. And, it's fine if their clients want to, buy some crypto with some other platform as well. But for that really deep, larger position in Bitcoin, I think this is a fantastic offering and we're excited to bring it to market. And then I just wanted to close. I really liked this framing. Sean alluded to it, the move from risk on to risk off. And Tom alluded to a lot more of the traditional 60-40 equity debt portfolio. Bitcoin really should rationally start to shave off percentage points from that debt portion of the portfolio over time. It's a better tool for the job, really, for lots of folks, especially if you still have, a decade or two before retirement. I think it makes all the sense in the world to start thinking about taking, 5, 10, 20% of that 40 and putting it into Bitcoin. So I think you'll see that a lot. We are very, very early in the adoption. I actually think there are about 100,000 people in the United States that have a good chunk of their net worth in Bitcoin and a good understanding of it, which is really what's required to hold it for the long term through all the volatility. So when you see figures of, how many people own Bitcoin and it's, in the tens of millions or something, you have to remember that most of those people own a vanishingly small amount of Bitcoin, and very few of those people actually understand what it is they own and why. And so again, the thesis of the company and my recommendation to any of my own friends and family, and therefore for all of you in the FundStrat family, is to really go deep on education, invest in your education, invest in learning about Bitcoin as much as you invest in Bitcoin itself. And with that, again, thank you so much for your time and for the generous granting of this opportunity, and looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Thanks for that, Cory. Really phenomenal run through. I think the best place to start, and again, for all of our viewers watching this live, definitely feel free to drop your questions in the live chat. A big theme, excuse me, obviously is education. The more you know, the more you buy, etc. I'd like to start with yourself. Maybe bring it, take us through how you got orange pilled, quote unquote. And if Tom is rejoining us, I think it might be good to hear his perspective as well. But maybe we start there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of people, I had a couple of swings and misses. It's in my email from 2012. Someone gave me some Bitcoin. I remember the date because I was able to look it up later. It was January 29th of 2014 at a tech conference, and it was on a blockchain.com wallet. And I proceeded to lose the keys to the wallet and lose the Bitcoin forever. And then a friend of mine asked me to put together some slides for a cut of the sale of some of his Series LLC that included a couple of Bitcoin startups. This was Christmas of 2015. I went through the trouble of researching it enough to produce 2 slides on these companies. So, and it didn't take. I was busy with other things, doing ad tech and SaaS and market networks and all my Silicon Valley stuff, and it just didn't take. It wasn't until the noise of the run up in spring of 2017 that it finally smacked me across the face, and I started asking people questions. And I grabbed Digital Gold, the Popper book, and read that. Thought it was fascinating. I spent a year looking at everything else, working on crypto projects, and it didn't come to my sort of, Bitcoin is the thing for me anyway that matters the most and that I wanted to focus on exclusively until about April of 2018. And by that time, I was actually president and CIO of a 9-figure crypto fund and had just hired 12 people. So it took me about 5 or 6 months to extricate myself from that and be able to focus on figuring out what I could do for Bitcoin exclusively by that fall, and then launch Swan the next year. So that was kind of my Bitcoin story.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting because I think for a lot of people, their first, moments coming to Bitcoin is spent looking at price charts, right?
I traded way too much, and I'm a terrible trader.
Right. It's the go-to-market strategy for Bitcoin, or at least it was historically. And something unique about Swan is I think you're kind of trying to flip that narrative on its head and start with education, start with the assets, start with what it is. And obviously price appreciation is a benefit, and it's something we expect to occur. but it just creates a more sustainable relationship with the asset.
We still market greed. It's just long-term greed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Is there somewhere you start with education? Obviously, you have videos, like the constant market updates, very good narrative pieces. Is there somewhere, if you just want to get the most, get off to a good start with somebody, is there somewhere you point them to?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jan's book, as I've mentioned, and we give it away for free. It's one of the benefits of having him on the team. So swanbitcoin.com/free book. You can go and grab a free ebook or audiobook right there. Another resource that we launched, has it even been last month? Wow. Swan.com/canon, CANON. This is the Bitcoin canon. And we've gone through and grabbed the 1,000 best resources on Bitcoin from the last 13 years, the best podcast episodes, the best YouTube videos, the best tweet threads, the best blog posts, a lot of book chapters. And basically this lets well-known Bitcoiners go through and curate a rabbit hole about a specific topic. So you can get Lynn Alden talking about Bitcoin and energy consumption, and she'll have, her 8 or 9 favorite resources about that specific topic. Or you'll get Matt Odell talking about Bitcoin and privacy, and they'll have 6 or 7 resources in order. And you can go and sort of dive down that rabbit hole about some aspect of Bitcoin. It could be Bitcoin and us or in economics. It could be Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. So I think that is an amazing resource that's just kind of exploding in usage since we launched it last month.
Great. Cool. So let's turn to some of our questions from viewers. I think we have a couple pretty solid ones. Would actually love to start with this. It's a little more, it's a very poignant question. Don asks, how do you think through the opportunity of providing financial services such as borrowing and lending while still sticking to the Bitcoin ethos of self-custody and self-sovereignty?
Yeah, so we educate everyone on self-custody and we promote it heavily, and we give people the tools for that. We actually restrict asset-backed loans and BTC interest to the private client world, because that's essentially people that have purchased a lot of Bitcoin through us, or we know them to have significant liquid portfolios, and they're perfectly willing to make they're capable of making their own decisions there, and we don't feel like we have to be paternal when somebody is putting that much money to work. We guide them. They all have to have a relationship with a rep and have to talk to them on occasion, to do something like that. And we explain the risks, and we say, don't YOLO 2x long with your whole Bitcoin position. Make sure you size that appropriately. But that's kind of the approach. It's buy and hold, and ideally self-custody for retail, and essentially provide the services that H&Ws require.
Yeah, I think that kind of tees up a very important question. I think that any founder of a centralized financial company should, be equipped to answer. Obviously Bitcoin can't, in my opinion, can't be broken. But centralized financial companies can be. So maybe could you brief us on some of the security elements that Swan undertakes to protect client assets?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually sit on top of Prime Trust as the legal custodian, and we kind of rent their compliance regime and their KYC regime, which is the same thing that Binance and Strike and Fobi US and Bittrex, they all use Prime Trust. And then the back end for us and most of those firms, and another few hundred firms as well, is Fireblocks, which is a $8 billion valuation, New York based, but mostly Israeli staffed security company that focuses on custodying digital assets. And they use multi-party compute, SOC 2 compliance, insured better than anybody else actually at this point for the assets under their custody. So yeah, it's a really good setup there. We do not have money transmitter licenses. We are not a FinCEN registered money services business. We don't have access to our customer funds. We're an application layer that sits on top of the custody solutions, which keeps us very light, keeps the attack surface lower for us. And we've had dramatically low levels of loss to fraud historically, much lower than the industry, which is great.
That's great. I think fortunately, or unfortunately, the speed at which the industry has developed, there's been obviously a lot of accidents, but like it's part of it's growing pains, right? I think what's cool is there's a lot of really good options out there that clients should feel pretty safe putting their capital to work in digital assets now, given the amount of focus and attention on it. To that point, what does the onboarding process look like for financial advisors wanting to purchase Bitcoin for clients? I know you guys put a lot of focus into through conversations. I know you guys focus on a streamlined user experience. So maybe you could take us through that.
Yeah, well, first, I think we have plans to do an advisor services focused program with you guys at some point in the next couple of months, which will be great. And we'll have a lot more information out publicly about advisor next month. But broadly, it's super fast. We have the fastest onboarding times in the world for high net worth and for entity accounts right now. It's, usually same day or next day. Definitely sub 48 hours if you have your materials together, versus often can be weeks or months with some of the other players out there. So I think that's probably our number one operational KPI, to be honest, is onboarding time. We really focus a lot of our attention on making sure that people can get purchasing and get set up as fast as possible. So that's kind of the main thing. You've got a whole team focused on both the advisor and on your clients, and it's the same team. And so I think that is another big lift there. So you get a big extension of your team, people who have been financial advisors. Andy Edstrom, who runs advisor services, has been a wealth manager for more than a decade. It's his family business. His dad started a big firm out here in Los Angeles, and he used to work at Goldman. So he kind of knows this world really well. So we come from that world, we care about that world, and we want to help. So that's the pitch.
Great. And yeah, to your point, we definitely want to circle back with Swan and, give the financial advisors in our network an opportunity to hear a bit more about what you guys offer on that end of things. So yeah, stay tuned for everyone watching. Yeah.
But before you move on, really, you can just, if there are RAs that are interested, that are in the audience, especially the questioner, you can email me directly, Cory, Cory @swanbitcoin.com. I'll connect you with Andy and Ryan and get you ramped up. No problem.
There we go. Let's see. What role do you think layer 2s on Bitcoin will play? You'd mentioned Lightning Network. That seems promising. Do you have any view on smart contracts on Bitcoin? Yeah, you could take that question any way you want.
Yeah, I'm extremely bullish on Lightning. I think discrete log contracts, which is kind of like a layer 2 or a layer 3, is really exciting. There are some new things coming out with, I saw a new startup working on escrow service using Lightning. That seems fascinating. I'm also, I follow the rest of the industry and I'm up to speed. And while a lot of Bitcoiners take a very skeptical and probably rightly so view of some of the Bitcoin affiliated sort of DeFi attempts like Sovereign and Stacks, at the end of the day, it's permissionless by design. And if people want to plug into Bitcoin however they choose and want to promote Bitcoin, and it's getting people interested and getting them into the top of the funnel. A lot of Bitcoiners are actually freedom maximalists more than they are Bitcoin maximalists. And so they'd rather take the libertarian point of view and say, well, hey, if Bitcoin's incentives structure and sort of the network design can't withstand some of these folks coming around and trying to sort of launch an altcoin on the back of Bitcoin, then Bitcoin isn't what we thought it was in the first place. So that's, I'm probably agnostic and just kind of taking a wait and see approach. But I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to try to block people from trying to do something unless it really does affect the security model. But that would be something that would require like a Bitcoin improvement proposal. So like BIP 300 or something like that. You're not going to get that through because that actually affects the security model of Bitcoin. So I'd say drive chains are probably DOA, but whatever Stacks and Sovereign are doing doesn't really matter to Bitcoin.
Well, we might have to do an entire webinar on BIP 300 since you brought it up.
Yeah, we can get Paul in here. I like Paul a lot. He's one of the smartest people about Bitcoin. And I'd probably lose an argument to him one-on-one because he knows it so much better than I do. But I'm trusting some of the folks that I've developed a lot of trust for over time that there are problems with that.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave that there for now. How does Swan plan to compete with major brokerage firms, for example, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, once they offer a full suite to their private clients, retail investors and institutional clients?
Yeah. So most of them won't be really educating the way that we do and won't have the deep Bitcoin expertise that we do. Like none of them will have that, obviously. So I think you'll always have kind of the brand and the education focus that differentiates, and they won't have a Bitcoin pure message the way that we do. Even Cash App, which obviously markets Bitcoin plenty, also has to market coupons and stocks and payments and all kinds of other things too, right? So we can just be kind of on message, and we have so much headroom from here to keep going and build more things. And we also have to remember that we don't even know what services and products are going to make sense in Bitcoin, just like we couldn't forecast. This is the internet of money, and it was really hard in the 90s to forecast what was going to come with the internet over the 20 years from, the early 2000s to now. And I think it's going to be like that. I think it's important to have a company that's well-funded with an incredible team that's capable of being nimble and making smart strategic decisions and has really good management. And that's a horse you want to ride. So that was always my goal, was just get in the space by hook or by crook, have a company, grow the company, have a great brand, and be well-funded, and just build awesome products and services for the next couple decades.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. And it comes back to the key word of focus, and that's kind of central to everything Swan's doing. And why, quite frankly, I think Swan will just end up outcompeting these banks who will be last to arrive and just won't really get or understand the Bitcoin thesis until it's too late. And, Swan's already, bigger than all of them. So that's good. Let's see what else we got here. So we discussed to circle back around to adoption. We showed the S curve. I guess first question would be, how steep do you see the vertical part of that S curve being? And, step function increase or more gradual? And, what do you think are the variables or the events, catalysts that increase that slope?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you have a supply curve and a demand curve, and the supply curve is vertical. And so increasing demand shifts that curve up, and that's where it meets price. And it seems to move sort of logarithmically over time, which is nice. I am very public with my view that I think there's a 90% chance that we see $1 million a coin before the end of the decade. So, another 8 years from now, I think that there's that much growth, 25x from here or whatever, sometime between now and 2030. I also think that we'll probably see something like $5 million a coin 5 years later than that. So by 2035, and that you'll actually be able to purchase goods and services pretty much anywhere around the world denominated in Satoshis by 2035. So I think that's the kind of trajectory that we're on. As far as Swan, it almost doesn't matter that much what happens with price. When price pumps, as long as it pumps and then goes sideways and then pumps again, every once in a while, that's when user acquisition is incredibly cheap, when there's so much traffic that you catch a lot of it. And a lot of the people that are coming to their Bitcoin friends for recommendations, and those people recommend Swan. That's when you can grab, 10x more users in a couple of months or something like that, right? And that's kind of how the whole crypto ecosystem has grown historically, is people come in these waves. Bitcoin is anti-fragile. It's a rock star. All news is good for Bitcoin. It just doesn't matter. The only thing that sucks for Bitcoin is if it's not in the news. So if it's good or bad, all that you need is people looking at it. if you're a federal agent and you're supposed to go find Bitcoin criminals, you're probably going to end up running a Bitcoin fund a couple of years later once you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And I think, in our annual outlook, it's over a month ago at this point, we highlighted, I guess you would say last summer when China, banned Bitcoin, there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty domestically as well. That was the most robust period for the Bitcoin network in its history. And quite frankly, we might look back at that moment as the best thing to ever happen to it, because like you said, it's a anti-fragile asset that appears to get better the more it's challenged.
Yeah, that's true decentralization,
right?
Or as they say, it's the closest thing that we have to being alive. It benefits from hormesis, which is stressors. So any stressor that Bitcoin faces, the system and the people involved who like Bitcoin react very quickly to plug that hole and to make it better for the next threat.
I think that's just a sophisticated abstraction of no pain, no gain.
There you go. I like
right?
that too. Yeah.
All right. Last question, and then we'll let you maybe tie a bow on things. What keeps you up at night? What are the big, I guess, take it any direction you like, but hurdles for the company, concerns about government intervention? What keeps you up?
I think we're good here in the US. I think the chance of some major adverse action that remains sort of long-term enforceable contra Bitcoin is vanishingly small, like sub 0.5% or something like that. I think we're pretty much in the clear and have been for a long time. So that part I'm fine being in the US. I feel for people in other places around the world, and I want to help. And some of my own personal and fund investments are in companies that can help with people that are in less favorable regimes. As far as Swan, honestly, it's mostly just wanting to grow faster. That's it. Like I see the opportunity here. We are a good company that's made it from nothing to something. And now this path of going from sort of, Series B to public and sort of, the 9-figure valuation into the 10-figure valuation and beyond, hopefully, like that's the path that we're charting. And so I mostly focus on hiring and just putting the pieces together, and, excited that we've found a chief revenue officer to come in and sort of level up sales and marketing. Got a VP of engineering to help Jan out to kind of run half the team. Like those are the big hires that you've got to make. Got a chief information security officer, which is a huge deal. Very experienced guy, knows what he's doing. We've got multiple product managers, including somebody that, runs product and is good enough to take this for the next 5-6 years. So those are really what we're focused on is just building that team, being smart with partnerships. I think all of these distribution partnerships that we've got now with big mainstream media brands and being kind of the Bitcoin voice on their platforms, I think is a huge deal. And I think we'll just continue to fuel this next stage of growth for us.
Phenomenal. That was great. I think that's a great closing remark, but is there anything else that, maybe we didn't touch upon that you'd like to leave listeners with?
I mean, really, we aim to just meet people where they are, and we aim to be accessible at all times. So there's a way to scale with technology and tools today to have a one-on-one conversation with anyone who wants to talk about Bitcoin and wants to talk about Swan. So when I say to anybody on Twitter, email me or DM me, like we can catch all of those. I have other people that read my DMs, and if I can't get to it, like somebody else does, right? And anybody that emails me from something like this, like we will be there to answer your questions about Bitcoin and help you get involved. So I think that is something that has been enabled by all these amazing different SaaS tools and social media tools where you can actually make that promise. Like we'll talk to you about Bitcoin. And I don't think anybody else does that. Most people are kind of hiding behind these, email forms and things like that, but we'll actually talk to you about Bitcoin. And I love that about Swan. I think it's very unique.
As do we. Great. And so for all of our clients out there watching this, you can reach out if you're interested to learn more about investment opportunities in Swan. But if you want to contact Swan itself, Cory, where can we send them?
Yeah, I mean, you can actually just email me, Cory@swanbitcoin.com. And yeah, we're actually in the middle of working on a convertible note leading up into the Series B. So there's actually an opportunity for angels, accredited only, obviously, to get involved now just before the Series B, if that's of interest to anyone as well.
Exciting stuff. I'm sure we'll have some takers. Cory, thanks again. I think this was very informative, and looking forward to having another one of these hopefully soon.